Not all that SMEs, women and entrepreneurs go through are the challenges. Not all the challenges are the challenges of finance. Not all the challenges are challenges of capital. There are those with capital, but don't have updated and access information. Information is knowledge, and information is power. I know some of you might be seated here with capital. You have products, but those products are lacking in a certain part of the region of Africa. Kenya, you produce flowers a lot. You produce tea a lot. But there are some regions that want flowers and tea. Uganda, where I come from, there is excess milk. But also, we hear in some countries that the nutrition, they have nutritional challenges. While some farmers in Uganda are powering down what? Milk. Maize. So, what do we recommend at a personal level? Partnership, collaborations are the major key to unlocking these barriers. There is this new agreement called Continental Free Trade Area. In 2020 to 2022, I was lucky to coordinate a continental project called CFTA, Youth Inclusion Accelerator Project, that we are implementing with the support from GIZ African Union and youth-led organization in Africa. When the agreement was being signed, we asked ourselves, how sure are we that the youth know about this agreement? We started with a capacity gap study, and we found out the 3 challenges: access to finance, capacity gap, and institutional that connect youth and government. And that's how we have been designing programs, having boot camps. I think some of you have benefited from UREAD boot camps and EABC boot camps on capacity building for under 40 business leaders. We created an institution called ICOYACA, Independent Council Advisory Youth on CFTA. And now we are in talks with Afrexim on how the finances can be accessed without much requirements. And I had a call with someone from Afrexim and said, do you know if a youth or a company owned by youth that wants to export things within Africa, and those things are worth 5 million, do you know Afrexim Bank can be a guarantor? But we don't know. Imagine, I was here in Kenya 2 months ago. I got my colleague from Guinea. He says, do you produce sugar in East Africa? I said, yes, Uganda has excess. He said, can you give me 50 tons of sugar? I looked as from an entrepreneur. I said, this is money. He said, this is money. I called around, I called sugar, and he was specific, white sugar. You know, they are specific. Moisture, you know. I asked, and the guy said, I am a Muslim, we are in fasting. Before the fasting ends, I need 50 tons. They have access to see. My God, calling the industry, quotations, logistics, it's hell. Now I told the guy, I think I don't have capital too. He said, is capital yours? It's not yours. Capital is mine. I have a guarantor as a what? As a Flexim bank. Because I am from Africa, I am buying from Africa. So we did our conversation until I connect him with a factory, but the requirements and regulations are very, very difficult. So this is my end as we end, and from here, you will forge partnerships. I leave you with 3 words. I have been there. I've been in the youth, I've been in training. It's not capital. It's not what. I will use the Singapore model that they used, and it is in 3 words. Just give me 100 seconds, I will conclude. 1, they invested in what they call KPH. It's their formula. That's where they are. They used to come here in the 60s to study our policies. They invested in skills, K as knowledge. They have to go in the best schools. They have to get skills. Then, P, they adopted the best policies. Even if it is a policy from opposition leader. Even if an opposition leader says, I think they would analyze it, and I say, much is not a ruling party, but we must adopt and implement. Then lastly, they invested in what we call the last characteristic, but which is very difficult to us, honest. You will call someone and I say, I need 100 chairs. Someone will say, I have. If today someone gave you a contract to supply 100,000 cartons of water, will you supply, or you will go to the river and fill bottles? So the last was the difficult one, but honest, and that's why I have moved their country to where it is. Thank you for listening.
So what I've learned from our Honorable Moses, he's spoken about 3 things that have touched my mind. The first is partnerships and collaborations. The second is with regards to how is it that we can enable young people to understand that there are these financial institutions, and how is it young people and women can tap into less, when the institutions are giving you finance, less regulations, less enablement, so that we can be able to get funding for our different projects and businesses. So without further ado, I'm going to now introduce my panel. We're going to start with the Honorable, his name is Stephen Martin Eduru. He's a business statistician by training with a strong background in statistics, economics, and finance. He's also a young professional with experience working in international cooperation, mainly focused on support in the Eastern African community. And he presently serves as the technical advisor to the East African community as a Youth Ambassadors Platform, the Premium Youth Engagement Initiative of East African Secretariat, and the EAC Champion of Youth Engagement in EAC Integration under the EAC Youth Policy based in 2013, and to drive the people-centered agenda of the integration on housing and under the Political Affairs Department within the framework of Nyerere Center of Peace and Research. Karibu sana, Mr. Stephen Martin Eduru. A female, just like myself, a woman, and her name is Madam Ruth Ndegwa. She's the current Chief Executive Officer of Micro Food microfoods, and is an expert in financial and operations management with a distinguished multi-decade track record managing contracts, grants, and sub-grants for large-scale multi-million-dollar global projects in East and Southern Africa. She has several years of robust working experience with various organizations, an excellent grasp in organizational strategies, technologies required to optimize process and evaluation. Ruth has an outstanding passion for and understanding the entrepreneurship and innovation space, especially touching on women-led and youth-led enterprises in Africa. Karibu sana, Madam Ruth. Next, I'm going to call upon Ms. Bengisa, who is the Executive Director of the National Economic Empowerment Council in Tanzania. Ms. Bengi Mazna Issa is an Executive Secretary of the National Economic Empowerment Council, which is responsible for coordination, provision of strategic leadership, and monitoring and evaluation of economic empowerment in Tanzania. Ms. Issa is a chairperson of the Founders Board of Tanzania Entrepreneurship Competitive Center. She's also a chairperson of the Local Government Loan Board of Authority, a board member of Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange and Sagot Center. She's also was a former chairperson of the Board of Tanzania Director of Finance, Administration and Resource Mobilization of Tanzania, Commission of AIDS, and the Financial Controller of CARE International in Tanzania, and a lecturer in accounting and finance in Institute of Development Management, nowadays known as Mzumbe University. Mrs. Issa is a member of Presidential Advisory Committee on Gender Inequality Forum, a chairperson of the National Women Committee, a Financial Inclusion Board member of UNCDF, a member of the National Board of Women Certified Accountants, and a member of the Tanzanian Association of Accountants and Auditors. Karibu sana, Madam Bengisa. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to start with Mr. Stephen Martin Aduru. Congratulations for holding such a very big platform, especially for the young people in Eastern Africa. I'm very pleased to be in your presence. And I'd like to ask you, Mr. Stephen, what is your role in the Eastern African youth parliamentarian sector, and how does it impact the discussion for today?
As introduced, I'm also humbled to be in her presence, and most importantly, to be before the audience that we have today. The East African Community Youth Ambassadors is really a formulation of the East African Community Council of Ministers under the spirit that in having a discussion about a people-centered regional integration process, it is only befitting that that discussion moves simultaneously with a discussion around how young people are part of regional integration processes. So in 2013, at the time when the first East African Community Youth Policy was developed, the discussion was, how do you involve, or in the very least attempt to mainstream, the participation of young people in these processes? And that gave rise and birth to what is now the East African Community Youth Ambassadors Platform, a premium engagement of the Secretariat focused on creating of a people-centered regional integration process by fostering meaningful young people's participation in the same. And that happens along a couple of main areas. The first is around actively influencing EAC policies to ensure that they are reflective of the aspirations of young people in the region. I'm happy to see Honorable Mukiza, because last year the Youth Ambassadors delivered a petition to then Speaker of the Iyala Assembly, Honorable Martin Ngoga, around harmonization of tax incentives, but also around favorable tax regimes for young people and youth-led enterprises. So that is one of the things that the ambassadors do. The second is around fostering engagement with regional and continental development agenda, specifically on how they integrate with the development agenda within the region. We know that when we speak about regional integration, we must simultaneously speak about continental integration. And that while there may be the appearance of separate agendas, in the ESC they'll talk about, they have strategic development plans every 5 years. We'll talk about ESC Vision 2050. At the AU, they will talk about AU Agenda 2063. At the UN, they'll talk about SDG Agenda 2030. But the question is, where do you find interlinkages between these types of agendas? And how do you ensure that in finding the interlinkages, you fundamentally ensure that young people are part of those conversations? And that's the second, and several other things that the youth ambassadors do from time to time, focused on really ensuring that young people feel the integration processes with them, but that the voices that they have also constitute part of the discussions within the regional agenda. So that's just a brief insight into what the youth ambassadors do, and I look forward to further deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we give him a round of applause? My next question goes to Ms. Bengiza. What role can education and vocational training play in equipping young people with the skills and knowledge needed to actively engage in regional and continental integration? I can repeat again if you'd like.
Okay.
What role can education and vocational training play in equipping young people with the skills and knowledge needed to actively engage in regional and continental integration?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to start with challenges from the experience of the work that we are doing. Youth, especially youth in business, they are facing about 4 challenges. The first challenge is experience. Whenever they want to access, for example, they want to access finance, they cannot access finance from the commercial banks because they lack experience. But the second challenge is mindset. Some of the youth, they are faced with the mindset and the attitude, the way they've been grown up, and what they've been through actually make them what they are. And sometimes it's a challenge for them to focus on some of the things. The other challenge is to be patient on the type of business that they are doing in order for them to get a certain experience and therefore to be able to focus and achieve. We know that youth are very important in our societies, because when we talk of development, it will come from youth as the future grown-ups. But we know that if we invest in vocational training, we'll have better youth, especially in startup businesses. We know that most of the startup businesses which they start in our region, they actually being established by youth. But these startup organizations and the startup businesses, they also create jobs, and they grow a lot of innovations and social entrepreneurship. But the problem that we've seen currently, especially in our country, is the education system itself. And what we have done in our country is to make sure that we revisit the educational policy in order that we have more vocational skills, and therefore we increase the skill-based education, which will bring up confidence building to our youth, and also make them employable and increase employment. But not only that, also use of technology for development and the practical-based education. Practical-based education is going to be introduced even at the university education, so that they have hands-on skills in doing several things. Currently in Tanzania, we conducted assessment on youth businesses. And what we saw, there are a lot of startups, organizations starting up in our country, and there is an increase of about 15% of youth who are coming into new businesses. But the 45% of registered company in Tanzania, they are from youth, which is a big amount of companies when comparing to the total registered company. But most of the companies that are being registered by youth, They are actually in ICT sectors, agri-tech, and fintech. And therefore, we think that if we increase number of organizations who are going to support entrepreneurship for youth, it will help in youth entrepreneurship and making them more stronger and achievable in their organization, in their businesses that they are starting. So in the past, Tanzania, we have been implementing different skills building programs or skills development programs. We have an internship program which actually takes all students who are graduating from universities within 5 years. They're being allocated to work for 1 year, and the government pays for them so that they get experience to do the job in different companies and also public sector institutions. But there is also another program which we call it recognition of prior skills, which is a skills building program which actually recognizes any young person who is doing a certain work. Maybe can be a technician in a garage work or any other kind of work. So they bring back to the school, to the vocational education, and thereafter they're given certificate after 3 months, so that they're being recognized and be given a certificate which they can use in the future. We also have a program which sponsors youth. We sponsor about 40,000 youth per year. They get free education on vocational education in Tanzania. But there are also programs for access to capital. In Tanzania, we have about 2 programs which provides capital with very cheap interest rates for any youth who want to start a business. What they need to do is to form like a group or a circus, register it, and then they can access the capital. But there are other programs that we've done includes business formalization, because most of the youth they also do business which is informal, and therefore they're being trained on how to formalize their business so that they can have more opportunities. There are things that we do, like we are now just launched a program for youth in agriculture, which we call it Building the Better Tomorrow. This is a program which brings together youth. They stay in a hub for a certain amount of time and being trained in agriculture, and thereafter they'll be allocated land, and they can start to do agricultural work, including access to finance. So basically, these are the initiatives that we've done, and our future plans include to strengthen startup organizations in Tanzania by developing a policy and an act which is going to guide on startup businesses, and also set up a venture capital, because venture capital is not a loan. I mean, the youth can be financed in terms of capital, in terms of shareholding, rather than be given a loan so that they can access capital easily. The other thing that we are planning to do is to strengthen the access to capital through the loan mechanisms that I've mentioned, by making sure that they get skills of accessing this capital, and also being trained on how to return the loans at the right time. The other thing that we are planning to do is to set up a regulatory sandbox framework for scaling up innovation, so that innovators, they can be also trained on how to turn innovation into actual businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to ask Madam Ms. Ruth Ndegwa, the CEO of Microfoods. In your view, what needs to be done to support young entrepreneurs and innovators in scaling their businesses and accessing regional and continental markets?
Thank you. Allow me to speak through the eyes of a startup by the name MyDawa. And for those who are Kenyans, might be conversant with this startup, MyDawa started way back in 2015. And they started as an online pharmacy service provider. And what we'll do, we'll just email them or send them over mobile phones, our prescriptions, and they will deliver medicines to our homes or offices within 4 hours if you're within Nairobi, and if you're outside Nairobi, they will do that within 24 hours. So you will ask yourself, what has happened to my dawa today? What has happened to my dawa today, and my brother here talked about partnerships, is that my dawa partnered with Amref Health, and they introduced a second product, which was something to do with the youth, sexual reproductive health of the youth. And so they started offering those services through this partnership with Amref Africa. But over and above that, my dawa has revolved. Today, as we speak, my dawa not only offers the online pharmacy services, but also they do online consultation. They also do offline consultation. They offer laboratory services. But what is more interesting is that about a week ago, they were able to raise $20 million US. And with this money, they decided to invade Moses' country, which is Uganda, and they bought Guardian Health. Guardian Health is a startup in Uganda and has about 14 stores, not only in Uganda, but across the region. So this story of my dawa is the Africa we want, isn't it? So what do we need to do to get to where we want to be? Moses this morning said something that was very fundamental. And he said, and I'm borrowing from him, he's my brother, so I'll tease him on this floor. He said that we need to start consuming what we produce as Africans. Do we agree? Yes. That is exactly what we need to do. And therefore, what we need to do to support these young people in this room across our region of East Africa, across our continent of Africa, to get to that level of my dawa. There are several things that I'll talk about. Some of them have been alluded by some of the previous speakers. And so the first thing is access to information. And this is the most critical factor in this equation. You need to understand what are the regional value chain that are competitive and comparable within your region. We talk as Kenyans of tea, but our tea is exported as raw as it is to Pakistan. It's mixed with other things and sold back to our country. Do you know that probably you can sell the same tea in Ghana? It is very possible. So there's need for us to have the right information, not only at the urban areas, but also at the rural areas. So we shouldn't forget even those who are in the grassroots level. So access to information is very critical. But at the same time, as you think about moving to the regional areas or continental or even international, you need to understand that there are things that you need to do. If you have to sell, for instance, soya beans from Uganda, if you have to go all the way to Lira and pick soya bean and bring to Bidco Africa in Kenya so that they can produce oil, you need to know what is called standards. There are certain specifications that you need to understand. So we are talking as lay people here, that there's need for you to understand what are the requirements, what are the specifications for these products that I need to move from this border to the next border. It's very important. What are the regulatory requirements of a particular product? So all this information, we need to have it before we can engage in international trade or also regional trade. Secondly, we need to also empower our young people, and Madame here has talked about this. We need to capacity build our young people, and this is very critical. And when we are talking about upskilling, it's not upskilling for, say, financial management is critical, but upskilling for the right tools, for the right knowledge. So if you're trading in value addition in cotton, for instance, you need to understand what you need to do for you to be able to sell cotton to the next country. So that is very important. Secondly, we need to provide what I call technical assistance to the young people. So you cannot, so for example, if somebody is going into the solar energy, for instance, perhaps you don't have skills in this. So there's need for us to support you in order for you to move this product from ideation stage to the market. So that is very critical. And thirdly, also around capacity building, we also need to have a very elaborate systems within the BDS system. So it's important for us to have that. But having said that, there's also another component that is very critical for our young people. And this is the regulatory framework. It's important that even as we think about our rules and regulations, that there has to be two things. Number one, is for me, it's a challenge to those regulators, that they also need to understand that the young people are also innovating. And in most cases, they are caught flat-footed. They don't know. They need to be ahead of innovation. So innovation comes even before the policy work. So it's important that even for our regulators, probably some of them are sitting in this room, that they need to embrace technology and latest technology. And of course, having said that, we need to talk about standardization across the entire continent. We cannot ignore that. And harmonization. This is very critical. All these custom processes and policies, they need to be standardized. I buy goods from Rwanda, I buy goods from Tanzania, from Sudan, and even Uganda. But I'm faced with all these challenges. So there's need for us to embrace standardization and harmonization if we want to achieve this Agenda 2063 of the Africa we want. And fourthly, and very quickly, allow me to talk about access to finance. And I'm happy that some of the speakers who spoke yesterday and also this morning talked about the challenges that the young people face when it comes to finance. It is true, and it is a bare truth, that we don't have the collateral that our commercial banks keep on asking for. And so what do we need to do about this? I will echo what she has just said, that there is need for us to have a continental venture fund. And it's about time that our leaders, even as they congregate tomorrow and in any other forum, that there's need for us to start having this conversation about a venture fund that is customized to the needs of the Africans and not any other person. So that is very important. Number two, we need to talk about credit guarantee schemes. I know we have Africa Guarantee Fund that has been promoting credit guarantee schemes within our financial institutions, but we need to move a notch higher so that when a young person approaches a financial institution across our continent, they should be able to access a guarantee of between 50 to 75%. So this is an issue of risk management. So that is very important. But before you even approach these institutions for financing, you also need to be investor ready. So you need also to go through some programs that provide investor readiness for you to be investor ready, so that when you even approach a potential investor, and these investors could actually be sitting in this room. You could be having the money, but you have no idea. But these young people that are sitting in this room could be having fantastic ideas. So then how do we connect this young person to actually the person who has the social capital or financial capital that can invest in this young person? And last but not least, allow me to talk about incubation hubs that can be able to support our young people. The infrastructure itself is very critical. We need to start embracing the models that I've seen in Singapore, the models that we've seen in China, and all these other developed countries where they do have incubation hubs, where they can really nurture your ideas from actually ideation stage up to the growth stage. So we need to have these incubation hubs. I am a proponent of also having technological parks in our country. This is something that is missing. I know our government, I'm a Kenyan, so our government has been talking about setting up county integrated parks, and they are soon rolling out 14 of them as a pilot, and I think this needs to be embraced because this will touch actually those young people who are at the grassroots level. So with those few remarks, I want to challenge all of us that for us to achieve the Africa we want in 2063, then this is a wake-up call that we need to focus on production and production and production and nothing else. And truly, we can achieve that. I thank you.
I don't know if you feel inspired, but I feel like, Madam Degwa, you are the right person for that question. Asante sana. Now, on to my question, Mr. Moses. As an EABC strategist, how can you give us the grasp of the regulatory requirements of the ESG so as to let everybody know on how trade can be encompacted in the region?
Thank you. Thank you, my friends, my brother and my sisters on this panel. I think everything has been said. East African community, East African Business Council is a wing, is a private sector wing of the East African community. Like any other regs, we are driven by some rules and regulation and protocols. So we have the customs union and common market protocols. And everything that is in movement of people, workers, goods, services are enshrined in those two protocols, common market and customs union, which says that you have a right to move from one country to another provided you're a citizen. You have a right of establishment, you have a right of employment. But also for goods to move, to be traded within one country to another, it must meet critical principles. There is a principle of rules of origin. If you're trading, you're exporting a pen from Tanzania to Uganda, does the raw materials that you used to make a pen, were those raw materials gotten from that country or within the East African partner states? At least 80% of the raw materials. 2, does that product meet standards? If I'm to consume it, if I'm to wear it, if I'm to use it, does it meet standards? That's why we have standard bureaus. That's why we have some laboratories at the borders. And I think a month ago, a few weeks, there have been tensions within borders. Tanzania, Kenya, Kenya, Uganda. Especially maize and milk. And actually even Uganda and South Sudan. But my experience is that even some countries use the principle of standards to deny products. Sometimes the season is high. I have my milk. I don't want milk from South Sudan. I will say it doesn't meet standards. I have harvested a lot of maize. I don't want maize from Kenya. I will say they don't meet standards. So, but in a nutshell, basically, is that you have to have rules of origin and to have the standards. What does EABC do in case of those trade tensions? East African Business Council, its major role is advocacy. And we have members. So if your product doesn't cross a border, it's the role of EABC to know why and task the relevant officials. And we have done a lot. Remember when there was a cross of a border between Uganda and Rwanda, ABC played a lot of roles. Every day we have a desk for those. But also we work with institutions, like Honorable Member of Parliament that is seated here. East African Legislative Assembly is an arm that also make and pass laws, rules, and regulation. So if I cannot reach somewhere, I will go to Honorable and I say, you passed this rule, what should we do? Things have changed, we need this policy. Can you legislate? So that's also our work. And we work with government as the biggest stakeholder. From that, I wanted to add something, like 2 points about skills and technical and vocational institution that Tanzania has invested a lot. It's a way to go. I want to ask one question. Who accesses a presidential room? Do you have presidents? We have a president here. Who accesses his bedroom apart from his wife? No. You people don't know presidential rooms. A presidential bedroom, apart from the wife and sometimes the kids, it's a technician. When this light doesn't work, when the water doesn't work, do you know who accesses? Plumber. And those people don't have masters. Those people don't have, the highest they go, it's a diploma. Okay, let's leave presidents or ministers. You yourself in your house, how many do you call plumbers? How many times? And do you know how they are, the way we perceive them? They are this, it's dirty, it's what, but when your water doesn't work, you know how that they are not dirty. You will say, what is your cost? It is 50. You say, I'm adding 100, but come now. If that toilet is not flushing. So that's a way to do. 2, one of the examples of public and public-private partnership, let me give you an example. If you are from East Africa, what is the commonest car that is driven? Toyota. Isn't it Toyota?
Yes, Toyota.
Toyota failed 100 times to take off in Japan. You go and read the economics and history of Toyota. Failed. Government injected money, it failed. It could move and reach there, it hits up. Until they supported it, now it became independent. But how much money, how many youth, how many employees does Toyota employ? Lastly, Toyota is like an example of my dawa, the way my sister Ruth was saying. Then lastly, is that we are now in the last stages of Youth and Women Protocol, CFTA. They are about to start now negotiation and adoption. The zero draft is there. What is your role as a youth and women in that protocol? What do you want to see in that protocol so that when it is adopted, it captures your ideas? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to get from the audience a round of questions for the panelists. If any of you, from all the discussions that we've had.
Okay, my name is Eric Munyire. I'm from Elimu TV. So my question is, as a youth and as an entrepreneur, one of the things that we youth suffer and maybe there's an experience here in Kenya. I don't want to mention the names of the company, but somebody innovated something very innovative, went to a big company. The company took it as itself, went, established it, made billions. The product is actually even registered in UK. The African is poor because the peanuts he was given. What can we do to train young people about valuing their ideas and protecting their ideas? And then what can we do? Because you've talked about collaboration. In terms of capital, can we be able to, I don't know whether it is to be educated or to be told, because sometimes you might not have money, but you might have a skill. Like as a startup, I may need a lawyer. Lawyers are so expensive, but there's a young man who's just entered the bar and they can come and we can partner. So some of these things that you can be able to help each other to grow, maybe it's not really capital in terms of money, it's just having collaboration, we ourselves as youth coming together and we can be able to grow. So maybe, I don't know, you can address that. Thank you.
So much for that opportunity, Madam Ivy. First of all, let me thank all the panelists for your fantastic insights. Particular thanks to my friend Moses. Since yesterday, I've been listening to your various contributions, and what has stuck to my head is that we must buy Africa. Yeah, that's number one. Now, I'm Kenyan. For those of you who doubt that I'm from India, I'm actually fourth generation Kenyan, and I have a 23-year-old daughter. So when I speak, I'm speaking from a perspective of a mother, but also understanding young people. Now, I'm following the proceedings, and my question is simple. We talk about a lot of challenges that young people face, especially in terms of access to capital and access to markets and access to information. One challenge that I hardly ever hear being discussed in rooms and conferences like this are what I call the invisible challenges. And this invisible challenge, especially my female colleagues and the female panelists I would like you to comment on, is the issue of gender-based violence, sexual harassment, especially at our border posts when you want to cross borders. What happens there, and how can we better equip both the buyers and the sellers to address this very big problem, which is actually inazuia sisi wamama na wasichana kudu trade. Yeah, that's number one. Number two, the whole issue of the care economy. I'm not hearing anything about that. As women, young women, women in general, we have a very big problem called time poverty. So we have the financial poverty, but we have time poverty. And time poverty means that we want to be in the economic sphere, we want to contribute to the GDP, we want to be in the economic space, but time care responsibilities hold us back. So what can the government do to ease those challenges? And the last thing I want to say, of course, is about the mindset. And before I sit down, let me just introduce myself. My name is Banu Khan. As I said, I'm a fourth generation Kenyan. I'm a gender equality, social inclusion expert, and I have spent all my life, my 32 years of working life, trying to promote gender equality in Kenya, my country, and in Africa. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. My name's I asked. My name's Caroline Lilio Chanda. I'm from Uganda, from West Nile, and I've come here under the umbrella of East African Women in Business, Women Entrepreneurs Platform, EWIP. I'm so glad to be here, and we have talked of very many things. One, as she said first, I start from where she said, the poor infrastructure and services at the cross-border. Women face a lot of challenges. We have been brought here in this room as women and youth session, but I'm hearing everything about youth. Nothing is so much about women, no problem, because we are actually here as my sister said, these are women and their children. So we are here as women and their children, so all is well. There is a very big challenge on cross-border trade. I'm an entrepreneur. I got an award as the best woman entrepreneur of the year from Uganda Women Entrepreneurs Association. I've done, thank you so much, I've done very many things. I've trained over 200 youth in my region in agriculture. I work with very many women groups, over 4,000 women groups in my area. We plant sunflower. I have a machine I use for pressing sunflower oil. I don't believe in producing sunflower, buying sunflower from elsewhere. I make my sunflower, I sell people, and I promote farmers. I buy from them, especially women farmers. So I have passion for women. Yes, there's gender-based violence in all sectors, but in the cross-border, it's very intense. As we are coming, this time I came by bus, but as we are coming, even the toilet facility was not there. It's a very key issue. You come, you are under pressure, you want to go to the toilet, there's no toilet. I don't know what the people at the borders are doing. I don't know what our governments are doing from both sides, but it's a very serious issue. It has to be seen into. And of course, women face gender-based violence in all areas. You are selling at the market. I am a trainer under Private Sector Foundation on gender-based violence. I do a lot of that at the marketplaces. So I understand what women face at the markets. And then there's also the problem of the products. We have to use our own products. I make shea butter. We are so blessed in East Africa, especially northern Uganda. He talked of milk, but in the northern Uganda we have shea butter, which is not everywhere apart from West Africa. And I know some of you don't know shea butter. We have plenty of it here. Right now we have brought a lot of shea butter, but we are so blessed. But we don't use it. People take it out, they bring us lotions, they bring us products, we come and buy expensively out of our own products. Let's learn to make use of our own products. As they said, let's be ourselves. Use our own products. And then there's a lack of awareness among especially the youth. The youth have a problem. In Uganda, the government is so good. They gave funds for youth, but then lack of direction. Money was given and eaten because they didn't know what to do with the money. They called it government's money. They don't call it their own. They spent it and that was it. Recovery was a problem, so others didn't benefit. So the most important thing is to train the youth. Train them in the skill they want. Give them that skill. Okay. Take them through the skills so that they know what they're taking this money for.
Kindly be
I have
brief.
a lot to say, but maybe next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give to a male this time from this.
Did you say a male from this side?
This one. Okay, then you and then him.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Maybe I should stand like this so that I'm able to articulate my issues. My name is CPA John Miano. I'm a lead practitioner at an accountancy firm called Format Accounting and Business Consulting, where I help the MSMEs. And then I leave it at that, micro, small, medium enterprises to do their businesses, of course, auditing them and helping them on business practices. I'm also the immediate former director of the Kenya National Trading Corporation, which I've been trading recently. And of course, where the idea of counter integration hubs was born, it was actually under my docket while I was the sessional chair at KNTC. Here under the umbrella of the Global Youth Parliament, GYP, and I want to address especially our Mheshimiwa, that is what we call them. Thank you. I want to address this to the East Africa Parliament. One, and also everybody also can get a grasp of this. Well, we are doing trade across borders. I don't want to even to go to Africa, East Africa. what are you doing about a common currency? Because I don't see why I should go change my Kenya shilling into dollars, then to Uganda shilling or to Rwanda shilling, so that I'm able to trade. That is something you should think about, of harmonization of a single currency trade, especially about EAC, where we go to Africa. It is most important so that we have a harmonization of doing business. That is one. Two, I also want us to address, as the youth, about, of course, I'm an SDG champion. You can see I have my badge. And one of the goals in number 8, and I want to marry it with number 9. Number 8 is decent work and economic growth, while number 9 is industry, innovations and infrastructure. We go to number 13 is about climate action, which the youth, most of our youths are so involved about climate action and protecting our environment, say planting of trees, because that is where youth are most available. I was of a suggestion, and I have tried to put it through our Kenyan parliament, that when a youth or when a business that is affiliated with the youth demonstrates that maybe it has done a 10% tree cover, then we can be thinking of giving tax breaks or moratoriums, or maybe waivers when they are paying taxes, so that the youth are also able to contribute, one, to, of course, global warming, and well at it doing their business, because most of them may not have finances to pay, but we're also using a lot of finances to caution global warming. So if I demonstrate I have 10%, 20%, whatever, we can come with a figure, then I should get tax breaks and moratorium. The other one, and this is the last one, sorry, moderator, we can also talk about helping the youth come together with a single document. Well, I have paid my business permit in Kenya. I don't have to come and pay at the border again. If I'm coming from East Africa and I'm going to trade in Uganda, we can have a single trade business. Maybe that is regional, or if it can be, maybe around even East Africa. Thank you so much. Once again, I thank JYP for giving me the...
Yes, the panel, I'm Derek. My question come clear to the panel. I need to clarify or to identify about value chain. Because in business or in life, as youth, we are in a negative mind, negative thinking capacity. So give us the way and explain for us about value chain, and how you can start up our business through identify ourselves in a business sector, in agribusiness. Yeah, that's my question.
All right, due to public demand, I have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. My name is Viona. Let me say I represent ICOYACA, that is Independent Continental Youth Advisory Council on FCFTA, under the Kenyan chapter. So we see in the EAC, this question goes to Mr. Martin. We see at the EAC integration, regional integration pillars, we have the common market, which guides the free movement of people, goods and services, labor, capital, without restrictions. Okay, so here is what I want to say. Recently, when we were going to Uganda with a friend, he had a passport that was torn. Do you know he had to pay 500 shillings to be given a traveler's permit, yet you have also the ID? So this is my question. What are you doing in one of the pillars of free movement of people without restriction between partner states? That's Uganda and Kenya. So what are you doing to this? There's no need for me to pay a 500 shillings to get the traveler's permit, yet I'm an East African from one of the countries, from one of the partner states. Why should I pay that 500 shillings? I have my ID. Even if it's supposed to be there, and the new people should reduce that price, because it's really hurting the youth who want to trade between Kenya and Uganda. That's a very big restriction at the border. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, moderator. I'll be brief. I'm Lewis Morimorio. I work in the civil society. And my question will actually delve much into legislation. Recently, I ran for MP Dagoretti North, but my victory was postponed. So I'll direct my question to Ms. Ndegwa, who happens to be the CEO of Microfood. You've done a very nice presentation, but my concern is on the issue of incubation hub. My first bill was to be on the intellectual property, because it's not the first time we have an incubation hub in Kenya, like the case of Chandaria. So how assured are we that the right of this young Kenyan who has come up with this idea will be taken care of until fruition, that arrangement? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for this session. But for me, I always advocate that this should be a session after official opening remarks, when the policy, government, high level, everyone is here, is in attendance. But I'm happy for energies that you are asking when it is time for lunch. For IP, my sister Ruth will address it. Let me just reply to Ikoyaka, then Martin will add. In East Africa, there are 3 countries that when you have national IDs, you move, you cross borders. Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda. Don't say this, I am telling you with authority. Now, I've ever used it. But if they know that you don't know the information, maybe they take advantage of you. I have ever crossed, if you have an East African passport, you are entitled to 6 months to any country of East Africa. That's the rule. I ever crossed a country by road and someone gave me a week, 1 week. And you know how immigration officers are empowered. Someone can send you back. Someone can create something in a system that you're on a wanted list. But I said, why are you giving me a week? He looked at me, said, who are you? I said, I'm an East African. I'm entitled to 6 months. His supervisor was seeing him, and there was a queue. So I caused the havoc. The supervisor said, come this end. I said, what's wrong? He said, he gave me a week. I am entitled to 6 what? Months. Supervisor told him, give him 6 months. Sometimes officers also don't know. And in our cross-border trade, our first priority are the officers, customs and immigration. So you were right to say, I have my Kenyan national ID, I'm going to Uganda, I'm not giving you 500. I want to see you as supervisor. Be empowered, you a citizen. That's why we are here now. Now we have trained. It's part of the training. Then I think I also want to address a challenge from my sister from Uganda about cross-border facilities. EABC with its partners have been addressing those challenges, especially at one-stop border posts, to make sure that we have the following. 1, washrooms, toilets, breastfeeding facilities for mothers, pregnant facilities for mothers, and storage facilities. So that it doesn't look as if you are segregating. If I have a baby, I have a time, I go and I breastfeed him or her, then I go back to my what? To my work. Or if I am pregnant, I need time to rest. Then storage, so that if I have my products, I don't need to carry them home and come back. I think I can, I think that also addressed to the challenge that my sister Banu about the gender-based violence. Then I can address one of John, I think it's Mr. John, about single currency. We were supposed to attain single currency, I think, if not mistaken, 2024. It has been pushed 2030 something. The good thing we have the legislator in the house. But at an African continent, there is a solution that is called Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. It being spearheaded by CFTA Secretariat and Afrexim Bank. What does it say? If I am exporting my things to Ghana, I will pay my Kenyan shilling, the other person receives in Ghanaian currency. So I think you can clap for that. It's about to be achieved. Pan-African payment and settlement system. Let me give a chance to other colleagues to respond.
Thank you. Perhaps just to add on the PAPS, the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, fundamentally what the challenge was with cross-border trade was that if you were a Kenyan and you wanted to pay someone in Ghana, your money first had to be converted because there was no intercurrency convertibility. So they could not transform a Kenyan shilling into a Ghanaian shilling, into a Ghanaian, I don't know the name of their currency. Yes, the CD. So what they would do is they would convert it to a dollar and then convert it now into Ghanaian currency. But now when the Pan-African Payment Settlement System comes in place, it bridges that gap, that make the payment in Kenya, the other person will receive their money, the banks and the AFCFTA Secretariat in between will settle those challenges. So I think that that's a very important thing. Perhaps to speak to the issue of free movement of persons under the Common Market Protocol, I agree that information asymmetry, either to the trader or to the person moving, can become a barrier to their movement or to their trade, right? And I think I would agree for this situation, for Moses' course of action, create a situation and make sure it is resolved. But noting that, and I think he already noted the countries, Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, you should be able to cross with a national ID. There are still some challenges with some of the countries. Tanzania, you may have a challenge, but there are still efforts, especially at legislative level, but also at EAC Secretariat level, to ensure that those types of integration processes are fast-tracked. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Allow me to take, I think, 2 or 3 questions. I think the first one I'll take was from Banu, and I think they are the madam from Caroline, from Uganda. And they brought up a sensitive issue around gender-based violence, and especially at border posts. I think the governments are aware of these issues. But I think, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think what I would say would be being made aware of the violence that can be attributed to women. So for me, it's an issue of you being, as a woman or as a young girl, being aware that this is violence. It could be somebody just touching you in the wrong place. You should be aware that that is inappropriate. But I think what is important for me, even from a trading background, is that even at those border posts, there's need for us to have reporting desks that are special for women and women issue. So for every border, if I'm crossing in Busia on the Kenyan side and also on the Ugandan side, there should be a desk dedicated for a woman who feels violated or who have been violated in any way. They should be able to report. But what is important, and I see this in many African setups, is actually the enforcement. The enforcement of these rules, because we do have these regulations in all our African countries, but the challenge is the enforcement of the laws. So for me, that's a challenge I'll pose to maybe any government official sitting in this room. But having said that, allow me to also tackle the issue of intellectual property rights that was raised by, I think, Eliud and Lewis at the back. So for me, I'm an advocate of commercializing students' projects. So if you have a project that you're running in your university or in your college, I always say that you're sitting on a gold mine, because you can actually commercialize these projects and make money out of it. So you can move it from that project to actually to the markets. But then the question is, how are you protected as a young innovator in our society? So there's need for us to have commercialization laws in place. I think Kenya, we have started drafting those commercialization laws. I don't know how far it is. So there's need to have that. But at the same time, remember that you need to be able to use the institutions set by your different countries to be able to register your IPs. Remember, there's also some of the protocols that are coming through from CFTA. We do have protocols that will be addressing specifically intellectual property rights. So you need to be conversant with these protocols, but at the same time, even as local governments or national governments within Africa, we need also to be able to domesticate, the word is to domesticate those protocols within our national laws so that they can be implemented and we can actually come up with regulations within our countries to be able to protect the young innovators. So I think that is what I can say around that. And I think there was a challenge around moratorium for the young people. I think John Miano has stepped out. But I think for me, this is a message that we need to take actually to the Ministry of Environment to see how best we can reward some of the young people who are taking up the challenge of actually greening our environment. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Most of the things my colleagues have already talked about, but I see the importance of having protocols on intellectual property rights as a community, as well as a protocol for financing of the youth, because this is the area that we see has a lot of problems. On part of the gender, it's true that like in my organization, we work a lot with women, and we've worked with women empowerment in different areas. And in Tanzania, we are implementing Generation Equality Forum. Our president promised to tackle the issues related to women and the women empowerment in economic status. So what we have done and what we are actually planning to do is to have these, as Mr. Moses said, we are going to have these centers. I mean, in every facility, women should have access to breastfeeding and have other facilities like in the market, in everywhere, in schools, in workplaces, so that you said something about time-bound something, that women do not have time. They don't get time, really. Some of the women, they are very good in some of the things, but due to biological nature, they cannot really do those kind of things like businesses, to go out and do things because they need to take care of children and things like that. So we are trying to introduce that in our system so that women, even if they have small kids, they can still go out and do their economic activities. This way, I think you will have more opportunities in economic issues in our countries. Thank you.
There was a question for Derry about one African language. I think it skipped us. I think it has been passed by heads of state that Swahili is adopted. And and the countries in Africa, like South Africa, it has now been, it is a must in one of their syllabuses. But you know, even Swahili is our ancient language. It was born in Zanzibar, it grew up in Tanzania, it died in Kenya, and it was buried in Uganda. So we are trying to revive it. So we still have that language. Thank you.
All right. So the truth is time has overlapped, but because this is like a youth forum, and I really want to just give... Hold on.
An information.
Okay. So we're going to just have maybe, how can I say, like closing remarks, not questions, like maybe a point of consideration that you'd like to be noted down. And then from there, we'll have our closing remarks from our MP from Miala, representing Rwanda. So kindly, if you have any remarks, the floor is open.
Okay, thank you very much, Maspai Radiri. I represent the All Africa Association for Small and Medium Enterprises. I firstly want to commend the panelists. I mean, you have been fantastic. You have touched on all the points that are interesting. Thank you for the applause for the panelists. But all the same, particularly I think it is right to, I stand on the floor here on the rights of information. I bid you good tidings from the board and management of All Africa Association for Small and Medium Enterprises. And there is sound of good news from the African Union. The African Union, going by aspiration 1 of the AU Agenda 2063, talks about prosperity for all in Africa. Everybody wants to be prosperous. The youths, the women, everyone here wants to be prosperous. But how can you have prosperity without eradicating poverty? And how do you eradicate poverty without creating wealth? And how do you create this wealth, sustainable wealth at that, without the SMEs? And so standing on that prism, I would like to say that from our own body, the All Africa Association for Small and Medium Enterprises, we're here to unleash prosperity. And one of the first things to say here about prosperity is that everything that is produced in Africa is marketable. There is a market. And so with us and our partners, we are just using this platform to inform the youths that A to Z of what you have has a market. So we are creating market access for you. We are ready to purchase from you. We have off-takers within the continent and globally. And so afterwards, I will share more details with perhaps with the moderator, if that would help. But beyond that, I want to agree particularly with the panelist on white. She spoke about Continental Virtual Fund in fact, the women both spoke about Continental Virtual Fund for SMEs. And the African Union has endorsed, I think particularly the Department for Economic Development, Trade, Tourism, Industry, and Minerals. They've endorsed to have an Africa SME Development Fund. So what that means, invariably, is that there will be a pool of funds to support African youths, women. There will be a pool of funds to support entrepreneurs. And we at the background, we are eager to see that this comes to pass. And so from our point of advocacy, we are helping to implement the AU SME strategy, which I believe most of us here are not familiar about. The African Union has a strategy for SME development, and that involves all of us. If you do not know what plans the African Union has for you as an SME, as an entrepreneur, how would you benefit from it? And so we will be happy to engage more, to relate more, just to see that we have the solutions for what we want. We're talking about African solutions to African problems. We're talking about cooperation. We're talking about collaboration. We're talking about coordination. And so let me pack it up at this point. I thank each and every one of us again. And if I have left out anything, I want to say that the AFCFTA, there is a lot of room for sensitization that must go on. Because the youths do not know much about AFCFTA. It has to be put in music, it has to be put in schools, it has to be put in their curriculums.
Thank you.
And then, finally, because I have to go, I think at the border post, somebody talked here about what happens at the border post. It's not just Uganda and Kenya. I have a resident permit for Cote d'Ivoire. I have a card for Cote d'Ivoire. And between the borders of Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana is the AFCFTA Secretariat. They took 2,000 CFA. With my card, money was extorted from me. That's not good enough. So it is happening. I need to say it again because it has to resonate with everybody here. It's not just East Africa. It's not just Southern Africa. In West Africa. And so there is a fundamental problem. And so that sensitization we're talking about a caravan on SMEs for AFCFTA, there must be the immigration, the customs, the border communities. We must gather them together and have this engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just have one more comment from a woman. We'll have Madam.
I'm going to make it brief because I can see people are very impatient right now. My name is Joanna Kinyi. I'm an economist by training, but here I have come in my capacity of a member of the ODM Women League. Being an economist, I'm very passionate. You can clap for me if you want. Being an economist, I'm very passionate about economic empowerment, especially for women. Being an aspiring politician and looking at the African political landscape, without enough money, it's almost impossible to achieve your dreams as a woman. Yeah, for that reason, I'm quite passionate about youth economic empowerment and women economic empowerment. Just to make it short, Kenya, in the Kenyan setup, we already have avenues in which women and youth can benefit. For example, the AGPO. But the only challenge, which I'd also bring to our panelists, unfortunately, not all of them are Kenyans, but probably we can look at it from an African perspective. The AGPO that gives access to the youth and women to access government procurement, procedures. So now the problem is most of the time you find that as a youth, someone else who has the capital wants to use me to access AGPO services. What can we do to shelve youths from being used for the benefits of others who have passed that youth bracket, and women as well? Because I'm a young woman, I qualified for the AGPO services, but probably because I don't have the capital, someone who has the capital will use my company and use me to get this tender and then give me just a small portion. What can we do to shelve the youth from that? Otherwise, that's all I have for now. I want to congratulate everyone who has participated. I want to congratulate Ivy. You know, when I learned about that the topic now is unlocking entrepreneurial access for women and youth, I knew I'd find Ivy here because she's very passionate about agribusiness and entrepreneurship for youth and women. So congratulations to everyone who has participated.
Yeah, I haven't prepared anything to close this session, but I'm just impressed by the energy, dynamism, skills of, first and foremost, you the moderator and the panelists, and the youth, women here. I'm called Françoise Oumukiza. I'm a member of Parliament East Africa, Legislative Assembly, of course. It's one of the organs of EAC. I'm not going to take long here because I will have opportunity to present this afternoon about food security and nutrition under EABC initiatives, but also under IALA work. So now I think before I close, I'm going to talk of some questions that you raised that were addressed to parliamentarians, like the question about the currency, the single currency. We call it the single currency. The single currency is normally registered under one of the 4 pillars of the integration agenda. The first one is customs union. We have got a protocol on that. The second one is common market protocol. So we have been talking of common market protocol, but we also have customs union, but also monetary union. That one is registered under monetary union. And the problem with the EAC is that we are moving at a very slow pace. And no one is just left behind because it's all of us responsibilities. Because as the youth, you have got the youth ambassadors like our colleague here, Mr. Martin. It's very important to have you working energetically in that. You have to advocate to your, let me even call them heads of state, because I'm sure you have the possibilities and opportunities to reach to your heads of state and tell them we need you to speed up the integration process. Otherwise, EAC is the fastest integrating region, and Secretariat of EAC is ISO certified, which is good. It shows that we are moving surely, although just slowly. And then the problem with these 4 pillars, the last one is called political federation. So you can imagine how we can have everything unified without the political federation. At this time we are talking, we have got the political confederation process of it. Confederation means all the presidents will remain there, with maybe, one coordinating a little bit, but they will still having their sovereignties. So it's as if there is nothing new they are bringing in. Of course, it's something, but not really what we want. So we need a political federation as we headed to AFCFTA initiatives that market we want under Africa. And then, as far as the single currency is concerned, we can't reach out to the single currency without all the processes or under monetary union. Because we have what we call fiscal policies to be harmonized, the single monetary policy that shall be binding. When you call of a binding law, so partner states are kind of reluctant to speed up the process because it will be binding. And then we have already got 3 institutions under the single currency process. Because I served the committee on agriculture, or GP, General Purpose Committee, for my first 5 years, so I was able to follow the process of single currency because it's an issue for you. But good enough, Moses said about that opportunity we are having under the AFCFTA protocol. I'm not going to take time about that. It will be another session maybe. But you have to know the destination of the single currency is to have the central bank. So that central bank will harmonize, will coordinate all these single fiscal policies, the microeconomic convergence that are awaited for partner states to comply with these binding laws or those things. So it's a long process. That's why it was pushed back from 2024 to 2032. We can somehow understand because we can't have our child, just feeling, what we're taking, the baby, career immediately, but at least the child is there. So you have to take care of the child slowly but surely. So I thank you very much. Let me just congratulate you, all of you. And because time is running so faster, I can't enter into what you shared under inclusion, but this ecosystem is needed to make sure we move together. And you should also be the voice of EAC as a borderless, let me call it block, a borderless block. As we go for Africa to be borderless, without, border-free Africa, I'm telling you, even our businesses will continue to be a nightmare. So let me close this and ensure you, the last question from our colleague there is that, you are anxious about how you will get capitals, support. That's why we are here. So I joined this forum, this session, because I wanted to tell you, please, we are there as parliamentarians. We are advocating for all of you to make sure you get capitals, to make sure you are a part of, those people that are called rich or Richards, if you can call them. Maybe let me also thank youth ambassadors for the surprise yesterday. There is a motion I moved. Now the motion has become a resolution of the Assembly of the House. That motion was for a resolution of the Assembly urging the Council of Ministers and the partner states to enhance the effective participation of women, youth, and the person with disabilities, because it's very important. They were kind of left out in the protocol that is being developed for youth and women. So I want them also, to get a space there. And so that you can have access, to advantages that are being offered by AFCFTA. So I'm not going to read it through the motion entirely, but let me tell you that in accordance with the Article 49, Sub-Article 2D of the treaty, the Assembly urged the Council of Ministers and the partner states to develop and implement the programs and activities specifically targeting women, youth, and persons with disabilities, aimed at enhancing their startups' capacity or entrepreneurs and producers in the community in order to increase the effective participation of women, youth, and the persons with disabilities. And also, the Assembly urged the Council of Ministers to direct the Secretary General to explore and enhance engagement with the private sector, the business community, and development partners to increase and support programs that boost the capacity of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, startups. So this is what you want, isn't it? And then, or entrepreneurs, because it can be startups, but also entrepreneurs. And producers participate in cross-border trade and the AFCFTA. Lastly, but not least, direct the Secretary General to mobilize the funds from development partners, private sector, and partner states to support women, youth, and persons with disabilities, business-led platforms, and collaborate with the East African Business Council, EABC, in implementing programs and activities to support women, youth, and persons with disabilities businesses. So this is you. And you know, our core functions are the three: legislation, oversight, and representation. If I'm here for those three core functions. I will make sure the Assembly will continue to do oversight to make sure these things are implemented. If not, we will continue to make noise. It's part of our role. Thank you very much.
All right. So we're going to be having lunch, and I'm going to invite our coordinator, Mr. Brian, kindly to give us the coordination on how to do that.
Thank you so much. I want to echo my brother Moses' words. He said that this is the most vibrant engagement that we have had so far. A round of applause again for. It was wonderful. Our good, wonderful moderator and the panelists, we really appreciate. At this juncture, I will, before I invite you to for a photo, I want to push more goodies to you. And just to inform you as well, we are going to have a training, which I invite all of you. Let me get this training. So the training will be happening today, just after our last session. We are going back for a plenary session on food security. And then immediately after that, we have a training which targets the young people. So I invite you. It's a training, masterclass training for women and youth entrepreneurs, which will be done by Google. The training session is scheduled today from 16 hours. This exclusive training has been designed specifically for startups and aims to support the growth of thriving, diverse, and inclusive business across Africa. So I invite you for that training. After the training, you're going to have startup pitches. There have been selected startup pitches. We have selected startups which will be pitching immediately after the training. So after your lunch, there are more goodies for young people. Feel free to attend that. It will be at the plenary session at the amphitheater. Let me again request our moderator and the panelists to just step down here for a group photo. And because I'm also managing this program, I'll join them. Can I also request Honorable Member of Parliament to join for the group photo, kindly?
Afrika Mashariki.
Afrika Mashariki.
MCFCA.
Youth.